everybody, it's me, Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I'm going to be talking about one of the greatest punk bands of all time, possibly the greatest punk singles band of all time. Yeah, that's right. I'm talking about Buzzcocks. And like all my videos, I like to tell you how I got into the band, and that's basically because this was in 1979 at some point. My dad took me and my brother to get a haircut, and about 2 doors down was a record store. And of course, I was already a big music fan, so I walked over to the record store, looked up in the window, and there was a sign that says, "The Buzzcocks are coming." Of course, that's what I thought it said, because I didn't see that it says Buzzcocks. I thought it said Buzzcocks. So that instantly, it made me remember a few singles that I had seen at Licorice Pizza. So, they were advertising for the album, the first U.S. album coming out, called Singles Going Steady. And the album, I think, was due like the following week or maybe even that week. So I took my allowance and I went and I bought Singles Going Steady, and the rest is history. I've been a fan ever since. That was 1979, and such a wonderful, great band. I'm going to quickly go through the band's career here on CD, and we're going to start with this release that came out in January of 1977. It was an EP called Spiral Scratch. This is when Howard Devoto was the lead vocalist, and there was also Pete Shelley on guitar and vocals, and Steve Diggle on bass and vocals, and John Mayer on drums. This EP was one of the first punk independent releases, and it, I would say, changed the course of music. Really a fantastic, wonderful release, 4 edgy tracks. But Howard Devoto left the band right before this was due to come out. Now, there was a CD that came out later called Time's Up, which features rehearsals of these songs and more. And this was featuring Howard Devoto. This was recorded in 1976. And there are different versions of songs that are on this, plus original versions of songs that would later end up on the first Buzzcocks album that Howard Devoto was no longer part of. But Time's Up is a CD that features super early recordings by Buzzcocks, and Spiral Scratch was the first original release. Fan-friggin-tastic. Now, the next single, Steve Diggle moved from bass to guitar, and they brought in a bass player named Garth for this first single. Not one of my favorite tracks by Buzzcocks. It is called Orgasm Addict, but I love the B-side, Whatever Happened To, and that is fantastic and wonderful. And of course, they had other great singles, such as What Do I Get? But then in early 1978 came their debut album, Another Music in a Different Kitchen. And this has I Don't Mind, has a lot of great, wonderful tracks. See, Buzzcocks were a great singles band. I think they're a great albums band, but there are some songs that, that's pretty darn good. It's just not great. But there are great tracks spread across all their albums. But Another Music in a Different Kitchen, fantastic album. This is the 2 CD expanded edition. So you get some alternate versions and lots of rare tracks there. Definitely worth your time. Later that year, they came out with an album called Love Bites. Now, I remember specifically buying this album and Another Music in a Different Kitchen after I had purchased Singles Going Steady, and I'll get to that album in just a moment here. But this is the expanded edition. And there's a song here called Love Is Lies. I remember hearing that Rodney played that, I believe, and thinking that's totally different than, the rest of the Buzzcocks, because it's mostly acoustic. Steve Diggle handling lead vocals, because Pete Shelley was really the dominant one. Oh, by the way, on these albums, Garth had gone, and he was replaced by a bass player by the name of Steve Garvey. No, not the same Steve Garvey that played for the Dodgers. But this lineup here is just, it's the classic lineup. Even though Howard Devoto and Garth were on, the earlier records, this is really the classic lineup. Really fantastic. So the first 2 albums, both of these came out in 1978. This is the album with Ever Fallen in Love with Someone You Shouldn't Have, which is one of their most enduring songs, and most people know that. Now, in America, those albums did not come out, but in 1979, they released the album Singles Going Steady, and this is literally their A's and B-sides. So side 1 of the album was all their A-sides, and side 2 of the album was all their B-sides. And most of their B-sides are just as great as the A-sides. Just a great singles band. If you listen to just side one, you're going to be blown away by just how amazing Buzzcocks were. I still recommend you to buy the albums because they're fantastic and wonderful. That buzzsaw guitar sound, those great pop hooks that Pete Shelley was just could knock out, in a minute. Steve Diggle coming in with some great songs. As he advanced as a songwriter, he got more and more songs out there, including singles like Harmony in My Head is one of Steve Diggle's A-sides during this period. Most of them were Pete Shelley. But this version of the CD actually has, as you can see in blue, the original tracks that were on the regular version. I mean, after this album came out, there were still like 4 more singles that had been released before the original band broke up, and they've tacked those on here. So you get the A-sides and the B-sides there. Singles Going Steady. If you don't have any Buzzcocks, this is a great gateway album to get into. Wonderful. I'm a pop kid. I come from a pop angle, the hooks and the melodies. Buzzcocks were just jam-packed full of them. Singles Going Steady would be the one to get. Definitely search out for the import version that has the additional bonus tracks there. But either version, I mean, if you stumble across it on vinyl without those bonus tracks, still pick it up. Now, my favorite Buzzcocks album and one of my favorite album covers of all time came out at the end of '79 with A Different Kind of Tension. This is, in my opinion, it's so incredible. There's not as many hit singles on this album, but there's they try so many different things. Hollow Inside, the title track, a song called I Believe. Steve Diggle has some great songs on here, like Sitting Around at Home. Now, this expanded edition here is fantastic because it not only contains the full original album, like I said, what a great album cover that is. I have a T-shirt of that somewhere, but it contains the 9 album singles like Everybody's Happy Nowadays and Harmony in My Head. But it also contains the 3 singles that they put out after this album, because they had, with the first 3 albums, all 3 of them were produced by Martin Rushent. And so they went in the studio with Martin Hannett, who had produced like Joy Division and stuff. They're all Manchester related. And they recorded singles like Why She's a Girl from a Chain Store, Are Everything, more experimental songs, but they were just as melodic as anything else that they put out. And it seemed like as songwriters and as players, they were getting better. And then, of course, the band split up. But there is all the bonus tracks there. What a great collection this is. I mean, just what I've shown you right there, that's worth just dropping bank on. Just absolutely incredible. So then all the members went off and they did their separate things. I'm going to talk about the solo stuff after I talk about the rest of the Buzzcocks catalog. They reunited in 1989. All 4 original members. They did a tour, but then John Mayer dropped out. Then he was replaced by Mike Joyce, the former drummer from The Smiths. And they put out an EP. And while it didn't sound like Buzzcocks of old, there were still, 4 great songs. But then Mike Joyce left, and then Steve Garvey left. So they brought in Tony Barber on bass, and he also produced a lot of the records, and Phil Barker on drums. And those 2 would remain with the band for almost everything that I'm going to show you right now. First off, let me tell you that the next batch of albums are available in a box set called Sell You Everything. This is a collection of Buzzcocks studio albums. So let's go through this box set real fast and I'll show you these fine albums. Of course, there's a booklet here, but let's go through the CDs here. There's a CD you can't get anywhere else. Well, maybe now you can, but not when the box came out. It's called the 1991 Demo Album, and this contains demos since the reunion, and it contains the 4 songs that were on that Alive Tonight EP. So it's very interesting to hear this unreleased stuff. But their first official reunion album was called Trade Test Transmissions, and this is classic Buzzcocks. Like I said, Tony Barber on bass and Phil Barker on drums, Pete Shelley and Steve Diggle out there on guitar and vocals, and lots of great classic songs on here. The guitars, everything sounds like classic Buzzcocks, and this has bonus tracks as well. But then the next album was called All Set, and that came out in 1996. And again, this has bonus tracks. It's not as classic sounding as Trade Test Transmissions, but it still has some great Buzzcocks songs on it. The next album is called Modern, and that came out in 1999. This is them kind of messing with their sound a little bit. Still great songs, but there's like some keyboards and some different arrangements. They were sounding more contemporary, but still classic Buzzcocks, because you can't deny, Pete Shelley and Steve Diggle, they're right out there in front. Lots of great songs on that album. Not as strong as Trade Test Transmissions. I think it's a better album than All Set, in my opinion. But then their self-titled album came out in 2003, and this sounds like a band really trying to sound contemporary, really trying to sound like the bands that were out at that time. So you're talking, this is a lot heavier. This is, I'm not saying it sounds like The Offspring and Blink-182 and Green Day and stuff like that, but it's a lot heavier, and it's a really good album. It's not a great album, but it's self-titled, and it does have bonus tracks in the box set as well. And then their next album came out in 2006. It's called Flat Pack Philosophy. This is actually my favorite post-reunion album, on par with Trade Test Transmissions. Lots of great songs on here, classic Buzzcocks sound. Bonus material on that as well. Also in this box set is an album from 2011. It's called A Different Compilation, and it's a greatest hits, but it's the new lineup re-recording a bunch of their old classics. So that is full of great Buzzcocks tracks there. You can't deny the majesty of these songs that these guys have written and recorded over the years. And then finally, the last album in this box set, but not the last album we're going to talk about, is The Way. Now, Tony Barber and Phil Barker had left the band, so they were replaced by Danny Ferrant on drums and Chris Remington on bass. And this isn't a great album. It does have some really good songs on it. But of course, this was the last Buzzcocks album to feature Pete Shelley, who passed away in 2018. Now, just a reminder that all those albums that I showed you, from the 1991 demo album to The Way, they all are available in the Sell You Everything box set on Cherry Red, all of them with bonus tracks. And this is so worth your while. If you didn't collect all the albums as they were coming out, I used to have all the, jewel case versions, as the albums came out, but this was a nice way to collect them all with bonus tracks and a smaller storage space as well. Now in 2022, the remaining three members came back as Buzzcocks with the album called Sonics in the Soul. Initially, I was thinking, maybe you shouldn't, maybe call it Steve Diggle's Buzzcocks or something like that. But I actually really like this album a lot. And it doesn't sound like a Steve Diggle solo album. I'll show you those in just a few minutes. But it's actually a really good album. Now, Steve Diggle seems to be singing in a slightly higher register than normal. His voice is landing somewhere in between where Pete's voice would have been and where he normally sings. If you were like me, initially hesitant on, wanting to hear what was going on with Steve Diggle and Buzzcocks, definitely check it out, because there's a lot of really good songs on it. Now, before I talk about the solo careers, I also wanted to bring up another box set. There is a live box set. I don't collect live albums, but this one I wanted to bring up is called Inventory. This is a box set that collects the original lineup's singles in CD format. So you're going to get everything from Spiral Scratch to the What Do You Know Running Free single. And it's a great way to collect all of the Buzzcocks singles if you didn't own them. These, of course, are the same tracks. Apart from the Spiral Scratch EP, I believe that everything here appears on the Singles Going Steady, the expanded edition. Now let's talk about the solo careers. Now, Howard Devoto went off and he formed a band called Magazine, and then later on he formed a band called Luxuria, but he put out a solo album called Herky Versions of the Dream, and this is the expanded edition there. It's got some bonus material on it. This has one of my favorite songs of the 80s called Rainy Season, and it's really a fantastic album. Now, Pete Shelley, he went back to working with Martin Rushent, who produced the first three Buzzcocks albums, and Martin Rushent also produced Human League's Dare album, amongst many other albums. He produced Stranglers and stuff. But Martin Rushent and Pete Shelley started working together, and out comes the album Homo Sapien, which is wonderful, mix of synth pop and acoustic guitars and Pete Shelley's quirky songs. Really fantastic. This is the expanded edition there. Took a lot of people by surprise. Me, I was a fan of punk and synth pop, but a lot of punks were like, oh, synth pop, ew. But with me, I was like, come on, bring it on, Pete, bring it on. Well, he kept bringing it on because he put out an album called XL1, and that came out in 1983. If I didn't mention it before, Homo Sapien was 1982. Like I said, that has bonus tracks. And XL1 from 83 has bonus tracks too. This also contains a song, Telephone Operator, which was kind of a popular song on K-Rock and, stations like that. And then in 1986, he put out an album called Heaven and the Sea, which brought him more back to guitars, but it was still, electronics and guitars. Lots of great songs on this. Should have been a much bigger album. There is a version out there that contains, I believe, 2 bonus tracks, but I have not been able to secure it. So this will do for now. Lots of great songs. Now, before and after these releases, like in the 70s, Pete had recorded an album called Sky Yen. That was like an experimental instrumental album, and he also recorded some experimental instrumental album later, solo wise, but I usually don't collect those, and of course they're not easy to find anyway. I don't even know if Sky Yen came out on CD, but Pete Shelley and Howard Devoto got together under the band name Shelley Devoto, and they released an album called Buzzcocks. And that album was actually a very experimental album as well. I don't have that album, but I thought I'd mention it. But let's go into Steve Diggle here. Steve Diggle, the final member I'm going to talk about for solo career. Initially, he put out an EP featuring John Mayer and Steve Garvey of Buzzcocks, and that was a 3-track EP. Then Steve Diggle formed a band called Flag of Convenience and put out some indie records, a couple albums, and a slew of singles and stuff. The best of those are combined on this album here, and it's a great collection that you definitely need to check out if you like Steve Diggle's songwriting. It's not exactly Buzzcocks, but still, it's good pop. Now, speaking of good pop, his solo albums are not really Buzzcocks-like. They're more, very 60s pop rock influenced, Brit pop-ish. But there are some songs that are very Buzzcocky. He had like 2 different songwriting styles, and he showcases them across these albums. Some Reality came out in the year 2000. Serious Contender came out in 2005. Air Conditioning came out in 2010. And Inner Space Times came out in 2016. And that is it. I have covered Buzzcocks, and I have covered the solo albums from Howard Devoto, Pete Shelley, and Steve Diggle. Now, again, I didn't cover Howard Devoto's magazine or Luxuria. Those may be saved for a different video somewhere down the line. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to play you a medley that I put together featuring 35 tracks, just little snippets of 35 tracks. It's under 7 minutes. It's about 6.5 minutes long, and it covers everything from the Spiral Scratch EP up to the Steve Diggle solo albums. And you're going to hear at least 1 track from every album that I talked about here. Sit back, relax. I hope you enjoy this, and I'll see you on the other side.
Boredom. What do I get? Oh, what do I get? What do I get? That's a bit of so why would I cry if you ever left me? Maybe 'cause you're all I'm living for. Ever fall in love with someone? Ever fallen in love with someone? Ever fall in love with someone you shouldn't fall in love with? These promises are made for us. Everybody's hoping on
working out of place, and the signs are written.
I am on fire, and it's the rainy season. In this desert, you made me create. You made me create. I am on fire. I'm a shy boy, you're the coy boy, and you know what Homo sapien too. I'm the cruiser, you're the loser, me a user. Home telephone operator, why can't I see you later? Telephone operator, why can't I see you
Just because your life ain't easy makes you feel you want to be someone else. Just because the world down on you, time on the ropes and you're dealing with dopes. Sick and tired of the same old jokes, but I'm a serious contender. Whatever life sends you, I can't find it anywhere. That sound of revolution in the air. I can't find it anywhere. That sound of revolution in the air. Like a bullet in your heart, time keeps ticking away. If there's pain in your heart, you go back to the start. Like a bullet in your heart. You're like a bullet.
Anyway, that's it for this video about Buzzcocks. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch it. I hope it inspires you to either go back and re-listen to your Buzzcocks albums or CDs, or maybe check them out if you've never bought any of this stuff before. Definitely delve into them. One of the classic, legendary British punk bands, and definitely one of the first indie releases and the greatest punk singles band of all time. Definitely check them out. I appreciate you. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, to ring that bell for future notifications. And until the next time, remember me. I'm Steve Schnee, the CD Junkie.